Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are gonna pull back the curtain on one of the most critical parts of Ansible, the inventory. Seriously, this thing is the absolute foundation of your automation. It's the map to your entire infrastructure. And, getting it right, well, that's the real key to making your automation scale.
I mean, think about it for a sec. One server, that's a piece of cake. You can just SSH in, run a couple commands, and you're good to go. But what happens when your setup grows? When it's not one server, but 10, or 100, or even more? That whole manual approach just completely falls apart. You start asking yourself, how do I even keep track of all this stuff? How do I push a critical security patch to just my web servers and not, my database servers? This is the exact problem that the Ansible inventory was born to solve.
So let's get down to it. What is an inventory really? The best way to think about it is like a phone book for all your servers. It's simply the list of all the machines, all the hosts that Ansible knows about and has permission to connect to and manage. And if you look at the official definition, you'll see something that's really powerful. An inventory isn't just a static file. Nope. It can be a whole directory of files or even a script that runs and generates the list of your servers on the fly. That flexibility is just huge. But no matter what format it's in, the goal is always the same. It's meant to be the single source of truth for your entire infrastructure.
And it really does start this simple. I mean, you can literally just open a text file and start listing the host names or IP addresses of your servers, one on each line. And that's it. Boom. You've got a valid Ansible inventory. Pretty easy, right? But of course, the real world is a little more complicated, so we're not going to stop there. Because let's be honest, a flat list of servers doesn't really reflect how things actually work, does it? Your infrastructure has a logical structure. You've got web servers over here, databases over there, maybe different environments like staging and production. Your inventory needs to mirror that. And this is where the most important organizational tool comes in: groups. This right here is the whole why behind groups. You almost never want to run a command on every single server you have. So by using these simple little headings and brackets, you can create logical groups like web for your web servers or DB for your databases. Now you can target your automation with laser precision.
And this is where the real power starts to kick in. Groups are super flexible. A single server can belong to more than one group at the same time, like maybe it's in the web group and the production group. You can even get fancy and nest groups inside of other groups. This lets you build out some really sophisticated models of your application architecture right inside your inventory file.
Okay, so we've organized our hosts into nice, neat groups. But what about the specific details for each host or group? Things like which port to connect to or what user account to use. For that, we need to make our inventory smart by adding variables.
These are what Ansible calls behavioral inventory parameters, which is a fancy way of saying they tell Ansible how it should behave when it connects to a host. So, for instance, if your development machine uses a non-standard SSH port like 2222, you just define Ansible port. If you need to connect as the Vagrant user, you just set Ansible user. It gives you this incredibly fine-grained control over every single connection. Now, the big question is, where do you put all these variables? You can just jam them right into your main inventory file, and that's fine for a quick test or a really small setup. But for anything serious, the absolute best practice is to use separate directories called group vars and host vars. Trust me, this keeps your main inventory file clean and readable. It lets you use more complex data like lists and dictionaries, and it is just way easier to manage as your team and your infrastructure get big. Okay, before we jump into the really advanced stuff, we've got to talk about a fundamental shift in mindset. It's a concept that really underpins all of modern infrastructure automation, and it's called pets versus cattle. This quote from Bill Baker at Microsoft just nails it. Pets are those unique, hand-built servers that you give special names to and you take care of them. If one gets sick, you nurse it back to health. Cattle, on the other hand, are just a bunch of identical, interchangeable servers. If one has a problem, you don't waste time trying to fix it. You just get rid of it and spin up a new one. The cloud era is all about cattle. And Ansible was built for this world of cattle. Instead of having to list out 20 different web servers one by one, you can just use patterns. A single line like web 01 to 20, well, that instantly defines 20 different hosts. DB-A to F gives you 6. This is how you manage infrastructure at a massive scale, by treating servers as a commodity, not as special little individuals. So, we've covered static files, we've covered patterns, but what about the real world, where your infrastructure is constantly changing, where servers are spinning up and shutting down every hour or even every minute? Manually updating a text file just isn't going to cut it. This is where we unlock the final level: dynamic inventory.
Now, this concept is a total game changer. Your inventory is no longer a static file that you have to edit by hand. Instead, it's a script that Ansible runs. That script can reach out to your cloud provider, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, you name it, and just ask, hey, what servers do you have running right now? The answer it gets back is your inventory, and it's always perfectly in sync with reality. This means no more manual updates and no more configuration drift. It's amazing. And this isn't some obscure niche feature. Ansible has inventory plugins built in for all the major cloud providers and a ton of other tools. And hey, if your source of truth isn't on this list, no problem. You can always write your own custom script. The whole system is completely extensible. Okay, so we've looked at lists, groups, variables, patterns, and even dynamic sources. Let's put all the pieces of the puzzle together and see how they work to manage a real-world application. So take a look at this typical Django application architecture. You've got a load balancer up front, a few web servers doing the heavy lifting, some task queue workers in the back, and a database cluster. Using everything we've just talked about, we'd create groups, a LB group, a web group, task, and DB. We could then create parent groups like production and staging to manage those environments separately. And then we'd use group vars to define different settings like database passwords for each environment. It becomes a perfect map of our application structure. So let's just do a quick recap of the journey, right? You start simple with just a list of hosts. As you grow, you get organized with logical groups. Then you make it smart with variables that you keep in separate files. You scale up your thinking with the cattle not peds mindset. And finally, you achieve true hands-off automation by letting a dynamic source be your single source of truth.
And that really brings us to the end. The Ansible inventory is so much more than just a list of servers. It's a living model of your entire digital world. It gives you the clarity, the control, and the scalability that you absolutely need for modern automation. So the final question I want to leave you with is this: how could applying these principles totally transform the way you manage your infrastructure?